My husband stole $75,000 from our daughter's future and vanished with his mistress, leaving us in ruins. He thought we were helpless, but my 12-year-old was already hacking his accounts to dismantle his new life piece by piece. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. Mark is shoving dress shirts into a suitcase while I stand in the doorway of our bedroom, my hands shaking so hard I have to grip the doorframe to stay upright. 22 years of marriage are being zipped into a leather bag, and he hasn't even looked at me once. He doesn't look like a husband. He looks like a thief in a hurry. "What are you doing?" I ask. My voice sounds like it belongs to someone else, thin and fragile. "What I should have done years ago," Mark says. He finally snaps the suitcase shut. The sound is like a gunshot in the quiet room. He pushes past me, his shoulder hitting mine. I stumble back, the silk of my pajamas catching on the door latch. I reach out to grab his arm, to find some piece of the man I had breakfast with yesterday, but he shrugs me off like I'm a total stranger. I follow him into the hallway, my bare feet silent on the carpet, while his heavy boots thud toward the stairs. "Mark, talk to me," I beg. "Is there someone else?" He stops at the top of the stairs and looks back. His eyes are flat. There is no guilt there, no sadness, just a cold, terrifying determination that makes my skin crawl. "This isn't about anyone else, Sarah," he says, and I know he's lying. I can smell a different perfume on his collar. I can see the way his phone is clutched in his hand, screen side down. This is about me needing to breathe again. He heads down the stairs. I run after him, my heart hammering against my ribs. I reach the kitchen just as he's reaching for the front door. Our daughter, Emma, is sitting at the table. She's 12 years old, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, a bowl of cereal in front of her. She doesn't look surprised. She looks like she's watching a movie she's already seen. "Dad's going on a trip," I say, the lie burning my throat. Emma doesn't look at him. She looks at me. "Mom, what's wrong?" "Nothing, sweetheart," I whisper. Mark doesn't even say goodbye. He opens the door and the morning light spills in, making him look like a silhouette. He says something about a voicemail, and then the door clicks shut. That's the sound of my life ending. A quiet, plastic click. I collapse into a chair, my lungs feeling like they're filled with sand. I need to think. I need to move. Mark mentioned money before he walked out. He said he wanted his half. I grab my laptop from the counter, my fingers fumbling with the password. The screen glows white, then blue. I log into the joint savings. The number on the screen is 247.83. My breath hitches. We had 15,000 in there for emergencies. I click the next tab. Emma's college fund. We've been putting money in there since the day she was born. It should have 75,000 in it. The balance is 0. I refresh the page. 0. I refresh again, praying for a glitch, a bank error, anything. The 0 stays there, staring back at me like an empty eye. I check the history. 3 days ago, while I was at my book club, the entire amount was moved, everything. He didn't just take his half, he took her future. I feel a hand on my shoulder. Emma is standing there. She's not crying. She's looking at the screen with those intelligent, dark eyes. "Did he take our money?" she asks. I can't lie to her anymore, not after seeing that empty screen. "Some of it," I say. "My college fund too." I just nod. I can't find the words. I expect her to scream. I expect her to break down. Instead, she picks up her cereal bowl and walks it to the sink. She rinses it out, dries it, and puts it away in the cabinet with perfect, terrifying precision. She turns back to me and says something that makes the room feel even colder. "Mom, don't worry. I handled it." I I spent the rest of that first day in a daze, calling the bank and hearing the same mechanical voice tell me the transfers were legitimate. Mark had full access. The law didn't care that he stole his daughter's education to fund a getaway with the mistress. By nightfall, I was curled on the sofa, listening to the silence of a house that felt too big. Then I heard it, a rapid, rhythmic clicking from upstairs. I walked up the stairs, my legs feeling heavy. The sound was coming from Emma's room. I knocked softly and pushed the door open. Emma was sitting at her desk, the blue light of her laptop reflecting in her eyes. She closed the lid the second I walked in. "I brought you some soup, honey," I said, setting the tray on her nightstand. "You've been up here for hours." "Thanks, Mom," she said. She didn't look at me. She looked at her school planner. "What are you working on?" "History report," she said. I kissed the top of her head, but my eyes drifted to her desk. There were papers scattered everywhere, not school papers, printouts of bank statements, and things that looked like email threads. I didn't say anything. I was too tired to fight. I went back to my room and fell into a fitful sleep, dreaming of empty vaults and Mark's cold eyes. The next morning, Emma was in the kitchen at 7:15 sharp. She was fully dressed, her backpack organized, her lunch packed. She looked more like a tiny CEO than a middle schooler. She kissed my cheek and told me to have a good day. "Emma, wait," I said. "Are you really okay?" "I'm fine, Mom," she said. "I'm really okay." She walked out the door, and I spent the morning crying over abandoned laundry. I called my sister, Janet, looking for some kind of anchor. "Sarah, she's bottling it up," Janet said over the phone. "You cried for weeks when Dad left. Emma hasn't shed a tear." "That's not natural." I looked at the ceiling, hearing that clicking sound again. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Emma had just gotten home and gone straight to her room. It wasn't just clicking anymore. It was a purpose. I waited until Friday to look. I know I shouldn't have, but the anxiety was eating me alive. I went into her room while she was in the shower. I saw a single sheet of paper sticking out from under her science textbook. I pulled it out. It was an email thread. The names at the top were Mark and Rebecca. My heart stopped. I didn't know a Rebecca. I read the messages. They were from weeks ago. They were talking about hotel reservations, flight paths to Florida, and something about handling the Sarah situation. "Mom." I jumped, nearly dropping the paper. Emma was standing in the doorway, a towel wrapped around her head, her expression completely neutral. "Where did you get this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Dad's not very good with passwords," she said. She walked over and took the paper from my hand. "How long have you known?" 6 weeks, she said, "about the mistress. I figured out the money thing the day before he left." 6 weeks? You've been carrying this for 6 weeks? Why didn't you tell me? "I wanted to be sure," Emma said, "and I wanted to figure out what to do about it." "Emma, this isn't your job. You're a child. He stole $75,000 from me, Mom. He lied to you. Someone had to do something." She reached under her mattress and pulled out a thick spiral notebook. She handed it to me. I flipped through the pages. They were filled with handwritten notes, screenshots of text messages, and lists of numbers. There were diagrams of bank accounts and something labeled Rebecca's employment history. My daughter hadn't just been grieving. She'd been conducting a full-scale surveillance operation. "What is all this, Emma?" "Research," she said. "Dad thinks he's smart, but he's careless. He doesn't clear his history. He doesn't even log out of his accounts." I looked at her, and I didn't recognize her. The little girl who liked stuffed animals was gone. In her place was someone focused, calculating, and completely unafraid. "What are you planning to do?" I asked. Emma took the notebook back and tucked it under her arm. "I'm still working on the final part," she said, "but don't worry. I've got it handled. She sat down at her computer and opened a folder. The screen was filled with names and dates I didn't recognize. Rebecca Sterling, Emma said. She works at Dad's accounting firm. She handles client investments. And Mom? She's been stealing from them for 2 years. The room felt like it was spinning. I sat on the edge of Emma's bed, looking at the screen. My 12-year-old daughter was showing me evidence of a federal crime like she was explaining a math problem. How do you know she's stealing? I asked. I got into her personal cloud, Emma said. Her fingers moved across the keys with a speed that made my head ache. Look at these bank transfers. She moves money from client accounts into a shell company, then into her personal account. She's been using it to pay for the house she and Dad are buying in Florida. I looked at the numbers. 10,000 here, 15,000 there. It was a systematic draining of elderly people's life savings. And Dad? Does he know? He's her boss's favorite, Emma said. He's been covering for her. Or he's too blinded by her to see the red flags. Either way, they used your credit to get the mortgage. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. My credit? Emma clicked another folder. There were loan applications with my name on them. Forged signatures. My social security number was typed into forms for a $200,000 loan. They were going to leave us with the debt, Emma said. The $75,000 from my college fund was just the down payment. They were going to disappear and let the banks come after you. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just an affair. This was a total assassination of our lives. Mark hadn't just left us. He had buried us. What did you do, Emma? I asked, my voice a whisper. I sent an anonymous tip to the State Board of Accountancy, she said, and to Rebecca's boss. I included the spreadsheets of the embezzled funds. She said it so calmly. She was sitting there in her pajamas, having just detonated a bomb in the middle of her father's new life. And that's not all, Emma continued. I called the fraud department at the bank. I told them my identity had been stolen. I gave them the loan numbers. They froze everything yesterday. The phone rang. We both looked at the nightstand. It was Mark. I didn't want to answer, but Emma nodded at me. Go ahead, Mom, she said. Listen. I picked up the phone. Hello? Sarah. Mark's voice was hysterical. He wasn't the cold, confident man who had walked out a few days ago. He sounded like he was drowning. Something is happening. The bank froze my accounts. All of them. And Rebecca? She's been suspended. Security escorted her out an hour ago. I looked at Emma. She was watching me, her face like stone. I don't know what you're talking about, Mark, I said. Someone is targeting us, Mark screamed. They're inside our computers. My email is opening and closing by itself. Sarah, if you hired someone, tell them to stop. This is illegal. I didn't hire anyone, I said, and it was the truth. There was a beep on the line, a soft digital chime. What was that? Mark asked, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. Emma leaned in toward the phone. She didn't raise her voice. She just spoke with a clarity that cut through Mark's panic. Hi, Dad. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. For 10 seconds, all I could hear was Mark's ragged breathing. Emma, he finally choked out. You took $75,000 from my college account. Emma said. You used my social security number to secure a mortgage for a mistress who steals from her clients. You thought we were too stupid to fight back. Emma, sweetheart, listen to me, Mark pleaded. Adults make complicated decisions. You don't understand the pressure. I understand identity theft, Emma interrupted. I understand fraud. And I understand that Rebecca blocked your number 20 minutes ago because her father cut her off financially. She's already talking to a lawyer to pin the embezzlement on you. How do you know she blocked me? Mark sobbed. Because I'm the one who sent her father the evidence of her affair with her boss, Emma said. I'm monitoring everything, Dad. Every text, every call, every move you make. Sarah, help me, Mark cried out to me. She's a child. She can't do this. You taught me that the people who are supposed to protect you sometimes don't, Emma said. So I'm protecting us. She reached out and hung up the phone. The house was silent again, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a command center. I looked at my daughter, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of fear. This was a 12-year-old girl who had just dismantled a grown man's entire existence in the span of a week. Emma, I said, taking her hands, this has to stop. We have to go to the police ourselves. We can't yet, she said, pulling her hands away to return to the keyboard. If we go now, we're just victims. If we wait, we're the ones with the leverage. Dad is living in his car because his credit cards are declined. Rebecca is being investigated by the FBI. If they panic, they'll start telling the truth to save themselves. She was right, but it didn't make it easier to watch. Over the next few days, I watched the news. A local accounting firm was under fire for a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme. Rebecca Sterling's face was on the screen. She looked pale and haggard. Emma spent her evenings writing. I thought she was back to schoolwork, but when I looked over her shoulder, I saw a document titled Digital Safety for Families. I'm making a guide, she told me, for other kids, so they know how to check if their parents are stealing their identities. It happens more than you think, Mom. I sat down on the floor next to her chair. I felt like I had failed her. I should have been the one watching the accounts. I should have seen the signs. I'm sorry, Emma, I said. I'm so sorry you had to be the one to do this. Don't be, she said. She finally looked at me, and I saw a tiny crack in the mask. I'm glad it was me. If it was you, you would have tried to be fair. You would have given him a chance to explain, and he would have used that time to finish stealing everything. She was right. I would have been weak. Mark knew that. He had counted on my grief to act as a smokescreen while he escaped. He just hadn't counted on his daughter being smarter than both of us. The following Tuesday, a man in a suit knocked on our door. He was from the state prosecutor's office. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. Mrs. Patterson? He asked. I'm here about the Sterling case. We received a very detailed package of evidence from an anonymous source. It mentioned your husband, Mark Patterson. I looked at Emma, who was standing at the top of the stairs. She gave me a nearly imperceptible nod. Come in, I said. We sat at the kitchen table. The investigator, a man named Miller, laid out folders. He showed me the forged signatures. He showed me the wire transfers. We've already arrested Rebecca Sterling, Miller said. She's claiming your husband was the mastermind. But the evidence we received, it tells a different story. It shows she was the one moving the money long before your husband was involved. Your husband was just her ticket out. Where is he? I asked. In custody, Miller said. He tried to cross the state line in a vehicle with expired tags. When we ran his name, the fraud alerts you placed on your accounts flagged him immediately. I exhaled, a long, shaky breath that felt like it carried months of tension. There's one thing we can't figure out, Miller said, scratching his chin. The person who sent us this evidence, they used encrypted servers. They accessed files that even our tech guys struggled with. Any idea who would have that kind of motive and skill? I looked at the stairs. Emma was gone. She had retreated back into her room. I have no idea, I said. Miller left, and I went upstairs. Emma was sitting on her bed, holding her stuffed elephant. For the first time in weeks, she looked like a child again. Is it over? She asked. The police have them, I said. They know the truth. Emma nodded. She hugged the elephant tighter. Then we can go to the park tomorrow. I have a science project due. I pulled her into my arms and held her. I cried then. I cried for the loss of her innocence, for the husband I thought I had, and for the terrifying, brilliant woman my daughter was becoming. 6 months later, the dust had finally settled. Mark had taken a plea deal, 5 years for his role in the fraud and identity theft. Rebecca was looking at 20. The $75,000 had been recovered from the frozen Florida escrow account and put back into a trust for Emma. I was working at the library, trying to build a life out of the wreckage. Emma was in the 8th grade. She was still the top of her class, but she had started a club at school called the Cyber Protectors. They taught younger kids about internet safety and how to protect their data. One afternoon, a woman approached me at the library desk. She looked nervous, clutching her purse. "Are you Sarah Patterson?" she asked. "I am. I read about what happened to you," the woman whispered. "About your daughter. My husband. He's been acting strange. Our savings account is lower than it should be. I don't know how to check." I looked at her, and I saw myself 6 months ago, the same fear, the same confusion. "Wait here," I said. I called Emma. She was at home, probably already on her laptop. "Mom?" she answered. "There's someone here who needs help," I said. I could hear the clicking start on the other end of the line. It was a fast, confident sound. "Tell her to meet me at the cafe in 10 minutes, Emma said, "and tell her to bring her laptop. I'll handle it." I watched the woman leave, a spark of hope in her eyes. I knew what would happen next. Emma would sit her down, open a series of windows, and find the truth in minutes. She wouldn't be cruel, but she would be thorough. I sat back in my chair and looked at a photo of Emma on my desk. She was smiling, holding a trophy from a coding competition. She looked happy. She looked powerful. I used to be afraid of who she was becoming. I used to think she was damaged by what Mark did. But as I watched the library door swing shut, I realized I was wrong. Mark hadn't broken her. He had just forced her to find her strength earlier than most. She wasn't a victim. She was a guardian. That night, as I tucked her in, I saw a new notebook on her desk. It wasn't about Mark or Rebecca. It was labeled Project Justice. "What's this?" I asked. "There are a lot of people out there who think they can take things that don't belong to them," Emma said, her voice steady and calm. "They think people are too tired or too scared to stop them." She looked at me and smiled. "They're wrong, Mom." I kissed her forehead and turned off the light. I walked down the hall, but I stopped at the top of the stairs. I heard it again. The soft, rhythmic clicking of keys. Emma was still working. She was still watching. And for the first time in my life, I knew that as long as that sound continued, we were perfectly safe. But then the clicking stopped abruptly. I heard a sharp intake of breath from her room. "Mom?" Emma called out. Her voice wasn't calm anymore. It was sharp, wired. I ran back into her room. "What is it?" She pointed at the screen. "Someone just tried to bypass my home firewall," she said, "from an unregistered IP address." "Who?" "I don't know," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "But they didn't want the bank files. They were looking for the folder I kept on Dad." A chill ran down my spine. Mark was in prison. Rebecca was in jail. "Mom," Emma whispered, her eyes wide as she tracked a line of code. "They aren't trying to delete the files. They're trying to see who sent them. And they just found our home address." The screen in front of Emma turned into a blurred waterfall of red text as the intrusion alerts screamed. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird while I watched my daughter's face pale in the glow of the monitor. Whoever was on the other side of that connection wasn't a panicked amateur like Mark. They were systematic and fast. I need you to go to the kitchen and grab the spare router, Emma said, her voice tight but controlled. What's happening, Emma? I asked, my hands shaking as I backed toward the door. Someone is tracing the data packets I sent to the prosecutor, she replied without looking up. They've been sitting on the edge of our network for days, waiting for me to log back into the evidence vault. They didn't just want to find me. They wanted to see exactly how much I have on the Sterling family. I ran downstairs, the hardwood cold under my feet, just like the morning Mark left. I fumbled through the junk drawer, my fingers catching on old batteries and twine until I found the device. When I got back upstairs, Emma had already pulled the main internet cable. The room plunged into a heavy, artificial silence. They got the address, Mom, she whispered, leaning back in her chair. The IP address was registered to the Sterling firm's main office in the city. Rebecca's father, Dr. Sterling, isn't just a surgeon. He's the one who funded that firm. He's not going to let a middle schooler destroy his family name without a fight. Is he coming here? I felt a cold sweat break across my neck. Not yet, Emma said. He'll try to scrub the digital trail first, but he knows there's a witness now. We spent the night in the living room, the lights off, watching the shadows of passing cars stretch across the ceiling. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a footstep. I realized then that Emma's justice had pulled us into a world where the rules were written in code and enforced with power. Mark was a thief, but Dr. Sterling was something much more dangerous, a man with everything to lose and the resources to make people disappear. By dawn, Emma was back at the kitchen table, her laptop tethered to a secure mobile hotspot. She looked older than 13, the dark circles under her eyes a physical price for the protection she provided. I'm not just monitoring them anymore, she said, showing me a screen filled with encrypted chat logs. I'm hitting back. Emma, we need to call Miller at the prosecutor's office, I pleaded. Miller can't stop a man who owns half the city's private security, she said, her jaw tightening. If I don't finish this now, we'll be looking over our shoulders for the rest of our lives. The front doorbell rang, a sharp mechanical chime that made us both jump. I peered through the curtains, expecting a black SUV or a man in a dark suit. Instead, it was a courier holding a thick, legal-sized envelope. I opened the door just enough to slide it through, my breath hitching as I saw the return address, Sterling and Associates. I ripped it open in the kitchen. It wasn't a threat, at least not a physical one. It was a cease and desist order combined with a private settlement offer. They were offering $250,000 for consulting fees in exchange for the deletion of all digital archives and a non-disclosure agreement. $250,000, I whispered, staring at the zeros. Emma, this would pay for your college 10 times over. We could move. We could be safe. Emma didn't even look at the check. She was staring at a photo of a woman on her screen, an elderly client of Rebecca's named Mrs. Gable. They're trying to buy the evidence because the federal grand jury meets on Monday, Emma said, her voice vibrating with a quiet, terrifying fury. If I take this money, Mrs. Gable loses her house. 12 other families lose their chance at restitution. But Emma, they know where we live, I reminded her, the fear finally bubbling over. They think they do, she said, her fingers dancing across the keys. What does that mean? I set up a secondary honeypot server last night, she explained, showing me a map of data pings. When they tried to hack us, I let them steal a set of GPS coordinates. They think the master drive is in a safety deposit box in a bank 3 towns over. They're sending their people there right now. The sheer complexity of her plan made my head spin. My child was playing a game of high-stakes chess with a millionaire, and she was 3 moves ahead. I'm sending the final file to the FBI's cybercrime division in 5 minutes. Emma said, her thumb hovering over the enter key. Once it's sent, the settlement offer becomes evidence of witness tampering. There's no going back after this, Mom. If we do this, Mark isn't the only one who goes to prison. The whole Sterling firm goes down. I looked at her, my brave, brilliant, frightening girl. She wasn't just protecting us anymore. She was holding the scales of justice for people she'd never even met. Do it, I said. She hit the key. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 10%, 40%, 90%. At 99%, the power in the house suddenly flickered and died. The darkness was absolute, thick and heavy like a physical weight. My pulse spiked, a loud drumming in my ears as I reached for Emma in the shadows. Did it finish? I hissed, my hand finding her small, cold shoulder. I don't know, she whispered back. The battery on the laptop is at 4%. Outside, the streetlights were out. The entire block was a sea of ink. Then, the low rumble of an engine idling at the curb made my skin crawl. A single pair of headlights cut through the dark, pointing directly at our front door. They cut the lines, Emma said, her voice remarkably steady despite the situation. They're trying to stop the transmission before the final handshake with the FBI server. We crawled toward the kitchen, staying below the window line. I grabbed the heavy flashlight from the counter, but I didn't turn it on. My mind raced. Where were the phones? Where was the car key? Then the laptop chimed. A small, bright sound in the dark. Transmission complete. The screen glowed. Emma didn't celebrate. She immediately began a remote wipe of her hard drive. In the light of the dying screen, I saw a black SUV pull into our driveway. 2 men stepped out. They weren't wearing masks. They didn't think they needed them. Mom, get in the pantry, Emma commanded, her voice a sharp whip. I'm not leaving you, I snapped back, my fear turning into a protective rage. I'm not staying, she said, grabbing my hand. The back door, now. We burst through the mudroom just as the front door gave way with a sickening crack of splintering wood. We ran into the backyard, our feet flying over the damp grass toward the neighbor's fence. I felt the bite of the cold night air in my lungs as we scrambled over the cedar pickets. Behind us, the house was suddenly flooded with light, not from the power coming back, but from the high-powered beams of 4 police cruisers screaming around the corner. Emma stopped, perched on the top of the fence, looking back at our home. The honeypot worked, she said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. I didn't just send the files to the FBI. I set the silent alarm for a home invasion the second the power line was severed. The men from the SUV were face down on our lawn within seconds, surrounded by officers with weapons drawn. My daughter jumped down into the neighbor's yard, brushing the dirt from her school sweatshirt. Is it finally over? I asked, my knees finally giving out. Emma looked at the flashing blue and red lights reflecting in the windows of our house. For us, yes, she said, but for the Sterlings, the nightmare is just beginning. The trial of the century, the local papers called it. Doctor. Robert Sterling and his daughter, Rebecca, stood in the federal courthouse, their polished veneer crumbling under the weight of thousands of pages of digital evidence. Mark sat in the back of the courtroom in his orange jumpsuit, a broken man who finally realized he had been nothing more than a pawn in a much larger, uglier game. I stood in the hallway after the final verdict, guilty on all counts. The assets of the firm were seized, and a court-appointed trustee began the long process of returning the $2,400,000 to the victims. Mrs. Patterson? Investigator Miller approached me, tipping his hat. The FBI still wants to talk to your technical consultant. She's busy with her algebra homework, I said, and for the first time in a year, I actually laughed. We moved to a new house 3 towns over, a place with a wraparound porch and a yard full of oak trees. The 75,000 US dollars was back in Emma's college fund, but she told me she wouldn't need it. She'd already been offered 3 different academic scholarships from tech universities that didn't care she was only 14. One evening, I found her sitting on the porch, looking at a new laptop, a gift from the family she had saved. She wasn't clicking frantically anymore. She was just watching the fireflies. "Emma," I said, sitting beside her, "do you ever regret it? Any of it?" She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I felt the familiar weight of the little girl I thought I'd lost. "I regret that the world is the way it is, Mom," she said quietly. "I regret that Dad didn't love us enough to stay honest. But I don't regret being the one who stood up." She opened the lid of the computer, and for a second, I felt that old spark of worry. But then I saw the screen. It wasn't a bank account or a surveillance log. It was a photo of us at the beach from years ago, before the suits and the suitcases and the secrets. I realized then that we hadn't just survived Mark's betrayal. We had been forged by it. I wasn't just raising a daughter. I was walking beside a woman who knew exactly what she was worth. "Ready for dinner?" I asked, standing up. "Always," she said, closing the laptop with a definitive snap. As we walked inside, I noticed a small sticker she'd put on the corner of the device. It was a simple shield with the letters EP. My daughter had won her future, and she was already looking for the next person who needed someone to handle it. We stepped into the warm light of our kitchen, and I locked the door, not out of fear, but out of the simple, beautiful knowledge that our home was finally, truly ours. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.